If there is one guarantee with every Eurovision, it's that someone will not get the result they deserved. In other words, they get robbed. Today, we are going to talk about 10 of the most robbed songs in recent Eurovision history. As always, make sure to like the video if you enjoy it. Make sure to subscribe to the channel as well. You can get all of mine and my editor Jay's socials in the description. I especially want to highlight our Patreon if you want to get videos a day early and our Discord server. Before we start, national final season is coming up pretty fast now. That means the frustration of trying to watch these shows from all across Europe, but running into geo-blocks wherever we go. Luckily, I have a solution for you, and that's today's sponsor, Surfshark. Surfshark's VPN has over 3,200 servers in over 100 countries. That means there will be nothing standing between us and our obscure national finals. They're high speed, so you won't have to deal with buffering either. If you're planning on going to Eurovision this year, it'll help you there too, and possibly save you money. With Basel sitting so close to the French border, many people, including myself, are going to be staying in France. By jumping onto Surfshark and setting your location to France, you will get cheaper prices on SNCF train tickets. There's more as well. Surfshark will notify you if you're the victim of a data breach, and they'll keep your web activity anonymous. They can also help you remove your data from data brokers who are selling it to dodgy customers. I presume this is why I haven't yet had Jimmy Joker Thornfelt show up at my window to pelt eggs at it. I would not give an endorsement this ringing unless I use the product myself. In this case, I'm very happy to say I do, and it was a fantastic decision. You can get an extra 4 months free. You can get an extra 4 months free using the code ESCGABE at the link in the description. So make sure not to pass up on that opportunity. Now that you've paused the video, signed up to Surfshark, used the code ESCGABE and come back again, let's get right into it. First on the list today, Montenegro 2013, Husi with their song Igranka. This one really hurt back in 2013 because it was one of my favorite songs of the year. I was at exactly the kind of age where two Montenegrin rappers dressed as astronauts yelling in a language I don't understand was exactly the thing I needed to hear. By the way, I'm still at that age now. I also enjoyed how the chorus was emphasized by Nina Zizic, who's trying to return to the contest this year, popped up onto the stage out of the floor. Obviously, dubstep and dubstep adjacent music like this has sort of gone out of fashion since, but I will always maintain that this is a huge banger. This came 12th in the semi-final and it missed out by 11 points, but that doesn't tell the full story. The scale of the injustice doesn't become clear until you look at the split results. What you see then is that this came 4th with the televote. 4th. The juries then firebombed it and put it in 14th. Even the weird Lithuanian guy who, for reasons I don't quite understand, was singing about his shoes because of my shoes, qualified from this semi-final. Somehow, this didn't. Under the new system, which counts juries and public votes separately, or under the newest iteration in the semi-finals where only the televote matters, it would have qualified comfortably and it would have scored more than 100 points in the televote in the final. Sadly, we were denied this, and as a result, this never moved from being a niche song to a proper cult classic in the contest. That is what it deserved. Hopefully soon, we will see some redemption for Montenegro in the contest since they're returning this year, and Nina Zizic, as I said, who was in this entry uncredited, is one of the artists participating. And I'll be watching their national final ungeoblocked thanks to Surfshark VPN, and you can too with code ESCGABE. Okay, seriously though, I promise that's it for the sponsorship spots. Next up, we have Croatia 2021. This was Albina with her song TikTok. I might get some hate for saying this, but I actually don't really like this song all that much. At the same time, I have to recognize the live performance was pretty much on point. It wasn't exactly revolutionary, but it was a solid girl bop that got the job done. And it was a lot better on stage than it was in the studio version too. Quite reasonably at this point, you might ask why I have it on a list of 10 entries that were robbed. And that's because Albina got royally screwed when it came to the results of her semi-final. For those who don't know, the top 10 songs from each Eurovision semi-final go through to the final. At the time this song was in the contest, 50% of the points in the semi-final came from the juries and 50% from the public vote. Albina came 10th with the juries and 9th with the public, but still ended up finishing 11th overall. This meant she missed out on the final by just a few points, behind the Angel guy from Norway and We saw you across the bar and really liked your vibe. Can we buy you a drink from Belgium? This might not be the greatest entry of all time, but this is the only Eurovision entry ever to finish top 10 with both the juries and the public and somehow not qualify for the final. For that absolutely horrible luck, Albina lands herself a place on this list. Moving on now to a more recent addition, and that is 2023. Spain, Blanca Paloma with her song Ea Ea. I was extremely confident about this song. I was so confident, in fact, that I tweeted this in April of 2023, absolutely convinced that it would come in the top 3 and challenge for the victory alongside Loreen and Karia. That was not accurate. Even when we got to the actual show and the staging, although very similar to the national final, didn't quite hit in the same way because of the restrictions of the Liverpool arena compared to the national final, I was still really bullish on this. I had it down for 200 plus from the juries, and I really thought it could do 3 figures with the televote as well. So when the juries ended up giving this 95 points, I was a little bit concerned. At the same time, I was still convinced the public would give it its just desserts and it would get a really strong result.
5 points.
This is one of the worst crimes committed by the European public in Eurovision in recent years, because most of Europe completely blanked this. It got 3 points from Portugal in the public vote and 2 from the rest of the world, and that was it. Nobody else gave it a thing. This is the bit where I call all of you out. Europe, what was wrong with you? I get that this is not the most mainstream of entries, and the main barrier to a good result was probably that non-Iberian countries are not that familiar with this style of music. But were there really so few of you who got this that you couldn't bring yourself to give it 1 measly point? This song was so unique and it was performed so well. Yet we paid it absolute dust. I will not be forgiving you for this any time soon. So to summarize,
easy top 3. If I'm not 16th!
Next, we're going to a country and a city that I very much hope we will see Eurovision in again soon. Kiev, Ukraine, 2017, and the song we're talking about is Norma John Blackbird from Finland. This song has mostly been forgotten by Eurovision fans now, but for me, the pain of this not qualifying is still very, very real. I loved this song from when I first heard it, and 2017 is a really emotional year for me when it comes to Eurovision. That was the first time I saw the contest live in the arena. For those of you who've been to Eurovision, you'll know that multiplies all of your feelings 20 times over. The first time is so special. What accentuates it for this song and other songs in this semi-final was that when the first semi-final took place, I wasn't in Kiev yet. I didn't fly out until the Wednesday. That meant I watched this semi-final at home with everyone else on Tuesday night, just hoping that my favourites would make it through so I could see them live in the room on the Friday and Saturday. It was especially stressful watching this show, knowing that the acts who didn't make it through I would never see live. Finland was not one of the entries I was worried about losing when the performances finished that night. In fact, after their performance, they had shot up the odds to win the whole contest. They looked a dead cert to qualify and were bouncing between 6th and 8th in the odds to do so. Just to remind you, like we said before, there are 10 songs qualifying from each semi-final, so being between 6th and 8th is a pretty good place to be. Given the fact that this is a really beautiful ballad as well, I expected the juries to give it some recognition. That is especially true given how good the vocals are here. So you can imagine my shock when we get to the end of the show and somehow it doesn't qualify. I am waiting for someone to explain to me how this came 12th with the juries. 12th. That means it was behind this Human by Rag and Bone Man ripoff, the Love on Top Beyonce ripoff, the Trashy Girl Bop, and, rather more justifiably, Portuguese Jazz Man and the Epic Sax Guy. The televote had enough sense to put this song in the top 10, but because the juries clearly vacated themselves of any sense of musical professionalism, this ended up crashing out, and at the time it was a massive upset. As a consequence, I have never seen this live, and I have never forgiven the jurors who did this either. I think I probably feel a little more passionately about that one than most Eurofans do, but most Eurofans will also agree that was a massive robbery. We're going to move on to a slightly different one now, which is Tamara Tadevska from North Macedonia in 2019 with her song Proud. This This one is going to take a little bit of explaining, so please just bear with me on this. On the surface of it, finishing 7th, which was easily the best result that North Macedonia has ever had, doesn't look like much of a robbery. I promise you there is something in this, there's just a bit of a story to tell to get there. In 2019, Belarus were still participating in the contest, but after the semi-final, their jury was actually dismissed. This happened because they had divulged details about how they had voted, which was against the rules of the show. Now, typically when a jury result can't be used, an aggregate result is constructed to take that jury's place. I won't go into the details, but basically, all of the countries are sorted into small pots based on who has similar voting patterns. If your jury can't be used, then the other countries in your pot, their result is aggregated, and then the set of points, the sort of overall top 10 from all of those countries combined, is the top 10 of the country whose jury vote can't be used. This was what was meant to happen for Belarus in 2019.
I should probably also say Belarus was in pot 3, which also included Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Russia. Thanks, Eurovision World, for this information. I love you.
The problem here is that some point along the way, a major error was made. Instead of taking the top 10, the bottom 10 from that aggregate result was taken instead. This meant that the last placed song from those other countries got 12 points, the second last got 10 points, and so on and so forth. This was discovered by my friend Eurobruno on Twitter, whose profile is on screen now. He posted this thread demonstrating that in the case of North Macedonia, they received 0 points when they actually received 10. The EBU eventually issued a statement where they corrected this result. They acknowledged the error and they pointed out that the top 4 of the contest did not change order as a result of the error. While this was true, they neglected one crucial detail. Had this error not been made, North Macedonia won the jury vote, not Sweden, who was announced as the winner of the jury vote on the night. What this meant was, on the night, the post-jury vote interviews were with Sweden instead of North Macedonia. The final points to be announced of the televote were Sweden's, and as a result, the final split screen was between the Netherlands and Sweden instead of the Netherlands and North Macedonia. A basic clerical error denied Tamara Tadevska a massive moment of glory on Eurovision night. And though her final placement would not have changed, that still remains a robbery in its own way. I will say the silver linings of this is that we got to see John Lundvik looking really mad when he didn't win Eurovision.
93 points, that means that
But it doesn't make what happened to Tamara any less wrong. This song makes the list on the basis of the fact that Tamara was robbed of one of the highlights of her career. At the very least, she still left a great legacy as the best result in North Macedonia's history. Going back to 2023 now, we're going to talk about Austria. Taya and Selena with their song, Who the Hell is Edgar? This song lived rent-free in the minds of Eurofans for months. Initially, though, not in a very good way. It all started with this infamous grainy leak from ESC Crystal Ball. At the time, there was a big negative reaction to this, and Taya and Selena have spoken publicly about how difficult that was to deal with at the time. Once the song was actually released a couple months later, the mood around it swiftly changed. Both in the fandom and in the betting odds, all of a sudden there was optimism. It shot up the leaderboard, and suddenly people were talking about this having a really great result. In those odds, they shot up from 27th to 8th in a matter of hours. There's no getting around that it's a silly song, but it has a serious underlying message. That is the exploitation of artists by streaming services, with the end result of those artists receiving next to no compensation for people streaming their songs. The specific example cited in this song is the 0.003 cents that Spotify pays to artists every time someone streams their song. As well as all of this, it is catchy as hell, and it will burn into your brain when you hear it. All seemed well initially when they qualified for the final, but they were rapidly hit with a hammer blow afterwards. Austria was chosen to open the grand final on Saturday night. It's a complicated issue, but as a general rule, performing very early in the show at Eurovision means you will do much worse with the public vote. The only way to get around this is if you have a massive government-backed advert campaign promoting the fact you can vote for your song 20 times, or if your name is Jerry Heil. Unfortunately for Austria, the reality that going early in the show really makes it difficult on the public vote side came out to be true, and in utterly brutal fashion. Despite receiving 137 from the public in the semi-final, which put them second overall in that semi-final, they finished 21st with the public in the final with only 16 points. Between that score and a much more respectable jury score, they limped home to 15th place. They were never going to win the show, but 15th was a big disappointment. This one is really frustrating because while obviously someone has to open the show, so somebody is going to be in this position every single year, it completely torpedoed Taya and Selena's chances of getting up high on the scoreboard. There were some elements of the performance that weren't the greatest, and the vocals were occasionally not perfect. But the difference between the semi-final and the final scores clearly illustrates how big that televote effect can be. These two deserved much better than this. While we're here, an honourable mention should go to We Are Domi from the Czech Republic in 2022, because they suffered the exact same fate. There's not really a solution to this, but honestly, if I was the organisers, I would try and find what you think is going to be the most jury bait song possible in the first half and put that in the first position. At least that way it will mitigate some of the damage. Next, we're talking about one of my favourite entries of recent years. It's San Marino 2021. That is Senate featuring Flow Rider, for some reason, with their song Adrenalina. In my opinion, 2021 was a great year for Eurovision. Not only was the standard of the songs really, really high, but the fact that we had to wait 2 years for the contest made it so much sweeter. On a personal note, it was my first time doing press too, so it holds some emotional value there as well. There were a lot of twists and turns in this season, but one thing that hit the fandom like a ton of bricks, harder than anything else, was the revelation that Flow Rider would be featuring for San Marino, and they actually had a really good song. Like, we actually thought this was going to do very, very well. Previously, San Marino naturally had not had the best luck in the contest. Their best result previously had been Serhat, the Turkish disco dentist from 2019.
You look sad and lonely. Is something wrong tonight?
He is a Eurovision icon in his own right, but 2021 felt like the year that San Marino were going to really make a break up the scoreboard for the first time. It really felt like they weren't coming to play because this song was an absolute banger. And like I said, having Flow Rider as the feature was one of the most left field trump cards in the history of the contest. Now, the thing is with Flow Rider is it elicits one of two reactions. For the roughly half of you in my audience who are under 24 now, the name Flow Rider would probably be met with a response of, who? But for those of you who were teenagers in the late 2000s and early 2010s, this news would make you propel your drink across the room. I don't know how Senate pulled it off to get this feature to happen, but I'm absolutely here for it. Unsurprisingly, I got really overexcited about this in 2021 to a quite silly degree. Before the show took place, I was breathlessly proclaiming on the ESC United livestream that there were 13 songs that could potentially win on the eve of the final. This was one of them. Unfortunately, and unjustifiably, this didn't even get close. In the end, they came 22nd with just 50 points. It's just as well this edition took place in the Netherlands because this one should have been referred straight to The Hague. I literally don't know what San Marino has to do to get a decent result in Eurovision. They threw absolutely everything at this, and they deserved so much better than what they got. Hopefully, Una Voce per San Marino will produce the banger that San Marino needs to finally get a really great result. I'm not optimistic, but I am choosing to remain hopeful. The next one is another slightly left field option because it's from the contest that wasn't. 2020, Iceland. Dathi Freyr with his song, Think About Things.
Baby, I can't wait to know. What do you think about things?
Given that the 2020 contest didn't happen because of, well, you know, this may seem like a slightly weird inclusion, but allow me to explain because in my opinion, this is one of the biggest robberies of all. Even without the contest to promote it, this song went viral and it charted all over Europe. It was massive on social media and it had appeal across every single demographic. Plus, it had a quirky and adorable staging that was basically ready to go at the main contest. It would have needed almost no adaptation at all. What I'm saying is, just imagine the impact that this could have had on the 2020 cultural landscape if the pandemic had hit in June instead of in February or March. This would have been basically everywhere, and it would have been absolutely inescapable. All of this points to one thing, despite the fact that fans and the odds are in disagreement about who would have won this edition. This was on its way to a massive landslide victory. It would have done especially well with the public, and it would have won the contest comfortably. Dathi Fred did get his chance the following year, but you can't capture lightning in a bottle like he did with Think About Things on a regular basis. There was simply no way he was ever going to be able to live up to that standard again. The contest lost out big here as well. Had 2020 taken place and had this song won and been as commercially successful as it was looking to be, we would have had 5 consecutive years of entries that won the contest and then made it to very high cultural relevance. We had Duncan Lawrence in 2019 and then this in 2020, Måneskin in 2021, Kalash Orchestra and then Marino finally in 2023. We would have seen an even bigger wave of interest both from the audience and from artists in the contest post-pandemic. As it is, musically, the contest is in a much better place now than it has been at any point in its recent history. It just feels like, though, that we lost out on a massive opportunity by not having this song on the parade of winners. Not to mention the fact that a country like Iceland does not come out with a song that could win the contest very often. Also, I'd quite like to go on holiday there sometime, and I was robbed of that opportunity too, so this is a double robbery. The only thing I will say is that this will always be a winner in my heart. We're going slightly further back now to 2010, Slovakia. Kristina with her song Horehroni.
Najkrajšie stromy sú na Horehroni, to tiché bratstvo praví poď.
This one will be slightly unknown, and for that 50% of my audience that are under the age of 24 now, you were young enough when this contest was held that you might not remember this song. That said, it's no coincidence that if you go on the YouTube comments, they all say that this was underrated or that it was robbed, because that is exactly what it was. This song was 13th in the odds pre-contest, and it genuinely looked like a real contender. Listening to it now, when it hasn't really aged at all, you can understand why it was that high as well. So how on earth did this come 16th in the semi-final? The only plausible explanation to me is that the Slovakian delegation spent the previous year walking under every ladder, smashing every mirror, and booting every black cat they saw into orbit. Because I am completely bereft of any kind of useful answer as to how this did so badly. This being in spite of the fact it was in a poor edition and a pretty weak semi-final. It wasn't like the live performance was an issue either. It was well sung, well performed, and nicely staged. Especially when you consider how much the contest has evolved since 2010, this still holds up pretty well in my opinion. From the artist to the song to the staging to the delegation, Slovakia got every single bit right. It's beyond harsh that this didn't even come close to qualifying. I think the wider impacts of this flopping have had a negative impact on the contest as well, because this was the last Slovakian entry that had any kind of potential. They made a half-hearted attempt the following year with the twins, but then they completely phoned it in 2013 with Max, Jason, Mai, and that was never going to do well. After that went terribly, they dropped out of the contest altogether and they've not been back since. You can't help but wonder, had Horehroni got the result that it deserved, Slovakia could have ended up staying in Eurovision for longer, and maybe domestic interest would have picked up enough for it to continue to be a worthwhile pursuit for the broadcaster. Sadly, we will never know if that is the case or not, because there is no prospect of Slovakia coming back to the contest anytime in the near future. Finally on the list, we're coming to this year, 2024, and I've gone for Norway, Gåte, with their song Ulveham. We're finishing off with the most recent example on this list, and while there were several I could have chosen, in my opinion, none of the others come close to this one. I get that folk metal and adjacent genres aren't exactly mainstream, and they're not the most accessible either. The thing is, though, that part of the beauty of Eurovision is that these genres that might usually not be listened to all that much get to take center stage for a moment and have the opportunity to connect with a wider audience in the way that they might not usually do. That was exactly what happened with this song in the final of the Norwegian national selection Melodi Grand Prix. This song won on the back of massive televoting support after it came second with the juries. They beat a Eurovision powerhouse in Kano who won the televote of the main contest in 2019 in the process as they finished second. I had really high hopes for this, as did just about everyone else. It was really popular among fans, and some of you may remember that when I reviewed the song back in February, I even said I thought it had the potential to win the whole contest. Let's talk about the song that actually won this show, that in my opinion could win the Eurovision Song Contest, and that is Ulveham by Gåte. That didn't quite turn out in the end, and it finished plumb last in the final. It only got 12 points from the juries, and it got 4 from the public. In addition to that, the semi-final results revealed that this came very close to being one of the biggest shock non-qualifiers of recent history. One of the things I highlighted in that review back in February was about how incredible I thought the singer's vocal was. I just adore this performance. I think it's incredible. I'm completely in love with it. I think the vocals are amazing. But in the end, I think that may have actually been this song's downfall, much in the same way that it could have been the downfall of Blanca Paloma in 2023. While I loved it, I think I underestimated the negativity with which the European public would view this style of singing, which is a real shame. Sadly, for both this and for Blanca Paloma, some people will find it too shrill, too shrieky. That's not the case for me because I really love both of these songs. But sadly, it is understandable, and I guess just not enough people connected to it. The other thing that makes me sad here is that I think this is bad news for the future of Scandinavian language entries in the contest, as well as unusual entries from those countries. This was only the 3rd time this century that a Scandinavian country had sent a song that used their native language. And because it went so badly in the end, I worry that this could serve to scare off Norway and scare off Norwegians from sending another song that's out the box or another song that's in their own language in the near future. Further to that, I think the chances of getting a song that's this out of the box in Melody Grand Prix in Norway or in the other national finals in Scandinavian countries are now a lot lower. In summary, with this one, everybody loses. Gorta lose because they underperformed. Norway lose because they weren't fairly rewarded for what was a big risk. And we all lose because it's going to be back to the same pop formula that has served Scandinavian countries so well for years. Except for Denmark. With that, we've made it through all 10 of my picks for entries that were massively robbed over the last couple of decades. Let me know if you like this format because I really enjoyed making it, and I would also love to hear in the comments below your thoughts on who the most robbed entries were and who I missed. In the meantime, make sure to subscribe and make sure to stay tuned because we're going to keep doing weekly videos going forward. Thanks again to Surfshark for sponsoring this video, and like I said, all the details for getting 4 months extra free are in the description with the code ESCGABE. Take care, and I will see you again in 7 days.